St. Bernard's Church on East Cordon Street is one of the best known in the city. And although this particular brick church was built in 1892, the story of St. Bernard's goes back much further than that. Like many Bradfordians, I have a special connection to St. Bernard Church. While I wasn't baptized here or married in this church, I was confirmed here, and all four of my children served as altar servers when they attended St. Bernard School. The beginnings of St. Bernard go back over 140 years ago. So let's learn more about one of the oldest churches in the city. Join us for this edition of Coffee with the Curator as we look at the history of St. Bernard Church. The parish of St. Bernard Church began in the home of a man named David Hewitt on Boylston Street in the 1860s, where a handful of Catholics celebrated Mass. By 1870, however, land was purchased on East Cordon Street, and a small wooden church, which was also used as a schoolhouse, was built on the site of the present church. In 1876, the first rectory was built on the corner of Webster and Cordon Streets, and in 1877, the Very Reverend William Coonan was assigned to Bradford. He would remain here for the next 35 years until his death in 1915, and earned a reputation as one of the best-loved priests that St. Bernard Church ever had. Father Coonan soon realized the need for a much bigger church, and in the spring of 1878, directed the construction of a larger building, also of wood, on the eastern side of today's church. A newspaper article dated May 3rd of 1878 said, "The Catholic Society have decided to erect a handsome church edifice in this city as quickly as possible. The plans, designed by George Wright, a prominent young architect of Niagara Falls, are on exhibit at C.J. Lane's office. The church will, if completed, according to design, be an ornament to our city." It was completed, of course, and dedicated in 1879 by Bishop Tobias Mullen. This is a sketch of that church, as it appeared in 1881. There are no known photographs of the outside of that wooden church, but this interior photograph still exists. Within 10 years, it was realized that even this church was too small. Now remember, there's only one Catholic parish in Bradford at this time. The parish will not be divided into three parishes, St. Bernard, St. Francis, and our Mother of Perpetual Help in Moose Run, until 1946. So there's a lot of people going to church at this particular church, and a new one was desperately needed. In July of 1892, the cornerstone of the new large brick Catholic church was laid. This is the same church that you see when you drive down East Cordon Street. It was dedicated on October 8th of 1893, and the Bradford era said the new St. Bernard Church was dedicated with imposing ceremony yesterday in the presence of a large concourse of people representing various creeds and localities. The weather was delightful. The dedication attracted the largest crowd of people ever gathered in this city to attend ceremonies of a similar nature. Excursion trains were run from Ridgeway, Smithport, and Eldred, and private conveyances from outlying towns brought many to swell the attendance. The architects were Post and Holmes of Toronto, and it was built by William Hanley of Bradford, of his famous Bradford red brick. The church was designed as a modernized Gothic style of architecture and is 146 feet in length and ranges in width from 54 to 72 feet. To the highest point of the arch ceiling is approximately 45 feet. The pews are oak and the original floors of Georgia pine. Seating capacity is 1,000 people. The interior of the church was of white plaster decorated with painted stencils, including the figures of two angels on the dome over top of the altar. And some say, if the light is just right, You can still see faint images under the paint. And believe me, when I was sitting there during my confirmation, I sure looked for those angels. Now you might say to yourself, hey, wait a minute. The inside of St. Bernard doesn't look like that. And you'd be right, because in the 1920s, the interior of the church was renovated. The present day stone walls, which are not really stone at all but fake, were etched into the plaster and painted to look authentic. At that time, the Italian marble railing was donated by Mrs. Barnstable in the early 1920s, and the Pietà shrine and marble canopies over the statues were also erected in 1931. Later, carpeting was installed. So, yes, it does look different today. You also might wonder what happened to the old wooden church that had been replaced in 1892 by the new brick one. Well, this map, a Sanborn map of 1895, shows that both churches existed for a brief time. The old wooden church was torn down in 1906 to make room for a new convent, which was built right behind it. On this map, the old church is shown in yellow, which represents a frame building, and the new Catholic church in red, which represents brick. Here's a photograph of the convent shortly after its completion. You can see in the lower right, this photograph was copyrighted in 1906. And again, you might say, hey, wait a minute, that convent was never there. You're probably remembering when it was across the street, on East Cordon Street. The convent itself, this large brick building, was moved across the street in June of 1922. Most people in Bradford remember that the rectory and the convent were torn down in 2001 to make room for the expansion of the Tops Market. But here is a photograph that was taken in 1959. This aerial photograph shows St. Bernard's Church, the parochial school, the rectory, the convent across the street, and the auditorium that was built in the 1930s. It was quite a complex, and today the only thing that remains is St. Bernard Church and the part of the auditorium that faces on Webster Street, now called Festival Way. This is a photograph of St. Bernard Church, taken by drone in 2019. The church has witnessed a lot of history in its lifetime, but like the solid red brick that it is built of, it plans to stick around for a long time to come.